Hello and welcome to my channel. Today we will discuss monotheism in the Bible. Did ancient Israelites practice modern monotheism? We are told that the Bible and the religions contained therein, namely First and Second Temple period Judaism as well as Christianity, were the world's first monotheistic religions. Now, as a definition, monotheism is the belief in the existence of one God. So was monotheism practiced in Israel or anywhere in the Bible? My answer to this is no, it was not. In fact, monotheism exists nowhere in the Bible. What we in fact see in the Bible and what was practiced in Israel was not what we would consider today as monotheism, which is the belief in the existence of one God, but was actually what is called monolatry, which is the belief in the existence of many gods, but worship and loyalty to one. Now let's look at Deuteronomy chapter 32 and from verse 8. So when the Most High gave to the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed the borders of the people according to the numbers of the sons of God. So when the Most High, when Elion, when Yahweh gave the nations their inheritance, when he divided mankind, he fixed people's borders according to the number of the sons of God. Now, in the past, I've heard some preachers or some commentators state that the sons of God are sons of Seth. But the word used here, sons of God, is Beni Elohim, or Beni Elim for short. Literally, the sons of the Elohim, or the sons of Yahweh. Now, who are these Beni Elohim? Prior to the death and resurrection of Jesus, all references to Beni Elohim or Beni Elim referred to divine beings, with one exception: Adam. In Luke 3, there is a long genealogy of Jesus. Now, in the past, I just brushed past genealogies. I believed that they were long, they were boring, and they didn't teach anything. Over the years, I've learned that that position was very misguided, very wrong. And I've since revised that, and I've started looking closely at genealogies, because everywhere you see a genealogy, there's something important. All right, there's something going on. It may not be on the surface, it may not be apparent. You may have to dig a little deeper, but there is always something there. And in this genealogy in Luke, all right, and it goes from Jesus straight back down to Adam. And when it reaches Adam, the Son of God, and this is the only place, to my knowledge, that a human being is referred to as a Beni Elim or Beni Elohim. So as far as the Old Testament goes, sons of God, or Beni Elim, or Beni Elohim, however you like to pronounce it, are direct creations of Yahweh. All right, so let's continue. In Genesis 6, we see a passage about the second great rebellion. And I will touch on the three rebellions in a future video. But this particular one, we're going to deal with the second rebellion. And reading from verse 1 of Genesis 6. When men began to multiply on the face of the land, and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were attractive, and they took as their wives any that they chose. Then the Lord said, My spirit shall not abide in man forever, for he is flesh. His days shall be 120 years. The Nephilim were on the earth in those days and afterwards, when the sons of God came in to the daughters of men, and they bore children to them. These were the mighty men who were of old, the men of renown. So this passage, the second great rebellion, it's about the creation, or the event that led to the creation of the Nephilim, or giants, and this then led directly to the flood passage. Now this passage is heavily alluded to in the New Testament. However, we don't realize it's being alluded to, because what is being quoted in the New Testament by Peter, by Jude, by James, by Paul, is the detail around this passage. And that detail is written not necessarily in a biblical passage, but in an extra biblical passage called 1 Enoch. Alright? And well, just what 1 Enoch says about the passage were that sons of God, Ben Elim, decided, they had a meeting at Mount Hermon, on the top of Mount Hermon, and they decided, they formed a pact that we are going to be rebellious to what Yahweh wants, and we are going to create our own offspring, or create our own whatever. And that led to them deciding to come down from Mount Hermon and have interaction with women, which led to the creation of the Nephilim. Now I'll get into this in significantly more depth in a future video, but for the point of this example here, what's important is that both First Temple period, as referenced in this passage I read, and Second Temple period, as referenced to all the stuff written in the New Testament about this event. Alright, and keep in mind, the apostles, the early Christians, etc., were all, or at the beginning, were all Second Temple period Jews. And both of them, First Temple period and Second Temple period people, understood that sons of God, or Beni Elohim, were divine beings. They were not human. Now, for further example, let's look at Job chapter 1. And Job chapter 1 from verse 6. Now there was a day when the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan came also among them. Now, the biblical scholar, Dr. Michael Heiser, argues that Satan in this passage is not the divine rebel from the Garden of Eden story that formed the first divine rebellion. He bases this on the fact that the word used in Job is Hashatan, or the Satan, the adversary, the opposer. So it is therefore a title like the prosecutor, right? And it is not a proper name. And this is true. However, there are some arguments, and there are many arguments both for and against this particular position. But for the purpose and point of this video, what is important in this passage is that nobody in this passage is human. Everyone here, every son of God, the Lord, Hashatan, they are all divine beings. There is no human in this passage. So all the sons of God in this passage were divine beings. And this passage, in fact, reminds me of the scene from Psalm 82, probably one of my favorite Psalms. Elohim Nisa Bahadat El. God has taken its place in the middle of the council of the Els, the council of gods. there are no humans there. So, the same way that that passage in Psalm 82 deals only with divine beings, when Yahweh decides to dress down disloyal Elohim, everyone in this passage, every son of God in this passage is a divine being. Let's look at another. So let's look at Job 38 and reading from verse 7. When the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. All the Beni Elohim shouted for joy. All of them. Now, the backstory of this passage is that God is addressing Job. In fact, he's putting Job in his place based on statements Job has made. So he started by saying, were you there when this happened? Were you there when that happened? Were you there when this was created or whatever? And this particular passage about when the morning stars sang together, or if you want to bring that in a more modern setting, when the first stars were created and all of the sons of God, or all of the Beni Elohim shouted for joy. Where were you? You weren't there, and no other human was there, because man was not yet created. Everyone in this passage, all the Beni Elohim, all the Beni Elohim were divine beings. Now, I like to use the term divine beings, if anyone is curious, because that's essentially what they are, divine beings. And in my previous video, I got into what are Elohim, what are El. But if we would like to use another term for divine beings, angels and devils will be just as useful, just as good, and just as accurate. And I will do a video on angels, devils, and demons. And yes, according to the Bible, there's a great difference between devils and demons in a future video. So, but for the sake of this, Beni Elohim, which is what I'm trying to show here, in the Old Testament, and up until the resurrection of Christ, where it is said that men now have the power to become Beni Elohim, to become sons of God. But prior to that, every reference of, every usage of Beni Elohim, sons of God, Beni Elohim, are of divine beings, of angels and devils, if you prefer that term. However, am I not contradicting the Bible? Doesn't Deuteronomy 4:28 say, and there you will serve gods of wood and stone, the work of human hands that neither see, nor hear, nor eat, nor smell? Isn't the Bible, isn't Yahweh here saying that other gods are just wood and stone? They're not real, they're fake? Isn't that what's going on? Am I not being contradictory here? Well, let's take a look at a couple of things and decide. Now, ancient Hebrew worldview is not only shared by Hebrews. Other cultures in the ancient world shared the worldview. They may not necessarily share the belief system. They may not have been loyal to the same gods or believe that my God will do this or my God will do that. But they may not even have had similar ideas about creation, depending on what period. But they all had certain beliefs of worldview. And the Greeks' worldview is extremely similar to Hebrew worldview. And it should be similar because a lot of Greek worldview and a lot of Greek culture is borrowed from the ancient Hebrews. In fact, the Greek alphabet, a derivative of which we use today, comes from the Hebrews. The English word alphabet, or the number of letters that we use, if you're a Hebrew speaker, you wouldn't say alphabet, you'll say aleph bet, or the first letter of the first and second letters of the alphabet, aleph and bet. If you're a Greek speaker, you would say alpha beta, which are the first two letters of their alphabet. So the Greeks borrowed quite a bit, included even some characters from their mythology, from Hebrew culture and Hebrew mythos. Now it amazes me when I look at modern art and I see how much more people who make art, movies, TV shows, books, understand and know about ancient worldview more than modern Christians. Modern Christians generally don't know about ancient worldview. But for whatever reason, a lot of modern art, and I've watched a lot of movies, and you see it's hidden, it's not definitely apparent unless you know what you're looking for, but you know they're using ancient worldview for some of their storylines. Now, let's look at one of these movies. There are many, but let's look at one of these movies that would help, drive this point across. That movie is Troy. Now, in the first scene, I'm just going to reference a couple of scenes from Troy. In the first scene, we see Achilles, played by Brad Pitt, and his Myrmidons. So they are acting as a spearhead for the Greek assault on Troy. So the Myrmidon ship with Achilles and the rest of the Myrmidons are way ahead of the Greek navy. And they storm the beach first, and they take the beach. All right, and you see very nice fight scenes, etc. And after they take the beach, then they assault the temple of Apollo. Now, after this assault, when they drive off the first set of Greeks, or the Trojans who were initially protecting the temple of Troy, there's a scene where a visibly shaken Myrmidon asks Achilles if it is wise to assault Apollo's temple. Wouldn't Apollo get mad and therefore bring some kind of fearsome retribution on the Greeks and on the Greek army? So Achilles watches him, and in response, Achilles cuts the head off of the idol of Apollo, which shocks the Myrmidon. Now in the second scene, we see a Trojan war council. And the Trojan high priest of Apollo is promising Apollo's vengeance on the Greeks. And he is basing this vengeance on signs that he has witnessed. An eagle with a snake in its talon. And, he's promising that Apollo and the rest of the gods will exact fearsome vengeance upon the Greeks. Now Hector, who is played by Rick Banner, gets up and ridicules this. He has a funny quip about, are you going to plan war strategy based on bird signs? It's a good movie, but for the point of this example, what I'm trying to show in this example is that they did not believe that by cutting off the head of the idol of Apollo, that Achilles destroyed or killed or did any damage to Apollo. They did not think that the idol of Apollo was Apollo. What they thought is what a lot of modern Christians think. What they thought was that the idol of Apollo was a sacred touch point that they will use for interaction with the deity. Now, just in case anyone wants to say, are you going to use a movie all right, to explain, a theological point. Well, let's look at some examples from the Bible. And the example I'm going to use is a story taken from 1 Samuel chapter 5. And the text states, when the Philistines captured the ark of God, they brought it from Ebenezer to Ashdod. Then the Philistines took the ark of God and brought it into the house of Dagon and set it up beside Dagon. And when the people of Ashdod rose early the next day, behold, Dagon had fallen face downward on the ground before the ark of the Lord. So they took Dagon and put him back in his place. But when they arose early on the next morning, behold, Dagon had fallen face downward on the ground before the ark of the Lord, and the head of Dagon and both his hands were lying cut off on the threshold. Only the trunk of Dagon was left to him. This is why the priests of Dagon and all who enter the house of Dagon do not tread on the threshold of Dagon in Ashdod to this day. Now, the backstory to this. So there was a battle, and the Philistines managed to capture the Ark of the Covenant. So in their mind, Dagon defeated Yahweh because we were able to defeat the Israelites and capture their ark, capture the very presence of their God. So they took the ark and they brought it into the temple of Dagon because Dagon now has primacy over Yahweh. Dagon now rules over Yahweh. That's what they are thinking. So they put it next to the statue of Dagon, next to the idol of Dagon, because Dagon is now superior. He has defeated Yahweh. So when they get up in the morning and the statue is overturned, the gods have battled and Yahweh has won. But they set Dagon back up. They come back the next day and Dagon is toppled again, but this time he's broken up. So do you know what they understand by this? They understand that Yahweh has destroyed Dagon, that Yahweh is superior to Dagon. And as the superior entity, where they had their battle on the threshold, that's now Yahweh's ground. That belongs to Yahweh. So they set back up Dagon's idol. They probably built a new one. But they would not step on the threshold because the threshold belongs to an enemy god. And as priests loyal to Dagon, they will not step on the territory of an enemy god, even if that god is superior. However, there's something we need to note in this passage. They will not step on the ground. They understood that Yahweh had defeated Dagon. However, they did not stop being priests of Yahweh because the statue of Dagon was broken to pieces. They understood that Yahweh was superior and Yahweh defeated Dagon. But they didn't think that by Dagon's idol being destroyed, that Dagon was destroyed. And that is because they understood that the idol, which was made of whatever, stone or plaster or wood or whatever, the idol wasn't Dagon, but a representation of Dagon that they use as a touch point, just as many Christians do today with a number of things. And I will leave that point right there. Okay? But what we will get from this, and what I'm trying to show from this, is, that they did not believe, although they believed that Yahweh became superior and Yahweh defeated Dagon, they did not believe that the destruction of the idol of Dagon meant the destruction of Dagon. So they did not believe that Dagon was wooden or stone or plaster. But This brings up our next question. I stated before that they would not walk on the threshold because they thought that that ground was now belonging to Yahweh, belonged to enemy Elohim. Where did I get this from? Let's see where I got this from, this idea that is essentially called divine geography. Let's see where I get this from. So, as an example of where I've gotten divine geography from, I'm going to use the story of Naaman taken from 2 Kings 5. Now, I've left it here, but I'm not going to read it. I'm essentially going to read the backstory. So Naaman was essentially the general or the field marshal, the head of the army of Syria. And he was a great man. He was probably second in command of the nation. And he had won many battles over Israel. But Naaman had an issue. He had a skin condition. All right, the Bible says he was a leper. He had some skin condition. And in previous battles, where they defeated probably certain Israelite towns, they had captured, a little girl or a young Israelite girl. And the Israelite girl then said to her mistress, who is more than likely Naaman's wife or one of his wives, that there is a prophet in Israel who can heal Naaman. He will just say a word and his leprosy will be gone. So Naaman's wife told this to Naaman, and Naaman went to the king of Syria. Then the king of Syria sent a letter to the king of Israel, who they seem to be in a period of peace, saying, I'm sending my general Naaman for you to heal. So, of course, the king of Israel is now perturbed because he's probably thinking that the king of Syria is using this as a casus belli, right, as a reason for war. How can I heal Naaman? I am not a god. But the man of God, the prophet Elisha, heard about this, and he heard that the king was in distress. So he sent him a note saying, don't worry yourself, send Naaman to me. So Naaman makes the travel, and he comes to Elisha. What Elisha then does, Elisha doesn't even come out to meet Naaman. He sends his servant Gehazi. And he sends his servant and tells Naaman to go and dip in the Jordan 7 times, and you will be healed. Naaman hears this, and Naaman is upset. He believes he's been disrespected. He believes he's been slighted. Number one, Elisha didn't even come out to see him. And number two, tell him, just go and dip in the Jordan. What nonsense is this? It have better rivers in Syria. It have much better rivers in Damascus. You send him to the Jordan. You send him to go and dip in what is essentially probably a sewer, right? I have better rivers, and so he is offended. He feels disrespected. He feels insulted, right? He wasn't greeted by the prophet, and then he's told to do this thing, and he's not expecting this. He's expecting something else. So then some of the men who came with Naaman talks him down. They said, listen, if you had come and the priest had tell you, or the prophet had tell you to do something strange, to walk on your hands for, I don't know, half a mile or something out of the way, you would have done it. What will it hurt? So Naaman relents, and he goes and he dips 7 times in the Jordan, and he's clean. So he comes back to Elisha, and Naaman had walked with payment, significant material to pay the prophet. He had walked with 10 changes of clothes, over 750 pounds of silver, over 150 pounds of gold. And he offers it to the prophet. And the prophet said, "No, I'm good. I don't want any. You're all right." Right? And that brings me to a point. Not everything is money. Unfortunately, a lot of Christians have gotten sidetracked by money, but not everything is money. Money loses value. And the things you buy with money essentially rot. They get old, they age, they lose their value. Don't invest everything into things that lose their value, into things that decay. Invest in things that will not decay, but last eternal. And the things of God do not decay, they last forever. So Elijah says, "No, I don't want any payment." So, but go, this time Elijah came out to deal with him, but go and you go in peace. So Naaman leaves again, but then he remembers and he turns and he comes back to Elijah. And he says, "Listen, I understand that the great God, the powerful God, the God of gods, and the God I will serve is Yahweh. However, I am the general of the army of Syria. I am the second in command. I'm the 2IC of Syria. And I have duties to my state. And in some of those duties, I want to know if your Lord will pardon me, because I need to go into the house of my God with the king, and I need to do whatever. But before I go to the house of God with the king, I would just like some dirt. Is this okay?" The prophet says, "Okay. You can take whatever, how much ever dirt." And Naaman takes 2 mule loads of dirt. But, Naaman asks, "Will Yahweh be okay? Because when I go into the temple of whatever God," right? When I go, because there's no God like Yahweh, I understand that. But when I go into the house of Rimmon, the God of Syria, will the Lord understand and pardon me, because that's part of my duties?" And Elisha says, "You're good." Why did Naaman want the dirt? I don't know. Naaman probably understood or probably planned to spread the dirt wherever he walks. Maybe he wanted to carry some in his pocket. But what Naaman understood, being an ancient person, he understood the ancient worldview. I am worshiping Yahweh from now on. I am no longer worshiping Rimmon. But when I go into the house of Rimmon, I want to worship Yahweh, but I need to be on Yahweh dirt. When I bow in the temple according to whatever duties I need to do, I'm going to be bowing to Yahweh. When I rise, I'm going to be rising to Yahweh. And I just wanted to understand if Yahweh will understand and he will pardon me. And Elisha says, "You're good." Now, as a Syrian, Naaman would have probably never read anything. He wouldn't know anything about Yahweh outside of this interaction. He would probably never had, attended temple or synagogue on Shabbat. He wouldn't know anything about Shabbat. He wouldn't know, or Sabbath. He wouldn't know about or participate in any ritual or festival of Israel. He wouldn't have done any of that. He wouldn't have known any of that. And yet, Elisha is saying that you're good, you're okay, you're cool, you're good with Yahweh. Why? Because Naaman did all that he knew to show his loyalty to Yahweh, which was he is taking dirt and he's carrying Yahweh's dirt, and he's carrying Yahweh's dirt back home. So he is now loyal to Yahweh, because wherever he is, I don't know if he's going to sprinkle the dirt in his house and wherever he goes in the temple, but wherever he is, he's on Yahweh's soil. So he's loyal to Yahweh. And that saved and justified Naaman. He was loyal to Yahweh. He didn't have to do any of the forms and the rituals. He just had to be loyal to Yahweh. Completely loyal to Yahweh. But in his mind, to be loyal to Yahweh, you had to stand, or you had to be on the soil of the land that belonged to Yahweh. It's like the passage from Psalm 137. And this is during the period when when the nation of Judah is taken into captivity in Babylon. And it goes by the rivers of Babylon, where we sat down. There we wept when we remembered Zion. For the wicked who carried us away captivity required from us a song. But how can we sing Yahweh's song? How can we sing the Lord's song in a foreign land? How can we worship Yahweh in a land where Yahweh is not, in a foreign land, in a land belonging to another deity? Now, let's move on. So I'm reading from 2 Kings chapter 18 about a particular scenario, a particular event. And the passage reads, "In the 3rd year of Hoshea, son of Elah, king of Israel, Hezekiah, the son of Ahaz, king of Judah, began to reign. He was 25 years old when he began to reign, and he reigned 29 years in Jerusalem. His mother's name was Abi, the daughter of Zechariah. And he did what was right in the eyes of the Lord, according to all that David his father had done. He removed the high places, and broke the pillars, and cut down the Asherah. And he broke in pieces the bronze serpent that Moses had built. For until those days the people of Israel had made offerings to it. It was called Nehushtan. He trusted the Lord, the God of Israel, so that there was none like him among all the kings of Judah after him, nor among those who were before him." Now the backstory of this was that during the Exodus, when Israel were wandering the wilderness, there was an event where they started getting attacked by serpents in the desert. And Moses went to the Lord for a solution for this. And Yahweh told him, make an idol, or make a statue, a bronze statue in the shape of a serpent, and raise it on a pole. And everyone who stares at that will be saved. They will be healed. They will not die. And Moses did that. Now, we have to remember that the Old Testament is a school. Yahweh uses it to teach us stuff. However, in normal human habit, sometimes we forget about what is being taught, and we get hooked up on the mechanisms. So what was being taught was, at some point in the future, I am going to raise a serpent, a divine being, which I'll touch on in a future video, why I'm calling a serpent a divine being. I'm going to raise a serpent, a divine being, and all who look at that serpent, and that serpent is going to be a curse. It's going to be, it's going to be judged. How I know it's going to be judged? Because it's bronze. Bronze is the color of judgment. right? So I'm going to raise that, and all who look upon that divine being who has been cursed and raised before you, all those people are going to be saved and healed. But they lost the teaching. They started to worship this thing that they call Nehushtan. And Nehushtan means an accursed thing of brass or an accursed thing of bronze. They remembered that this Nehushtan, when they looked at it, Yahweh healed them. Now, I don't know if they were using it for a touch point of Yahweh, but that would be logical that they would use the bronze serpent as a touch point of Yahweh. However, they didn't think it's Yahweh. And Hezekiah, probably the most post-Davidic, the most godly post-Davidic king of Judah, did not think that Nehushtan was Yahweh. So he did not think that he was destroying Yahweh or doing any damage to Yahweh by destroying the bronze serpent. So ancient people the Bible doesn't actually say, or isn't actually teaching, that these things made out of wood are the gods. They are the touch point for the gods. All right. So, it's not the Bible doesn't say, or the Bible isn't teaching that the only God in the Bible is Yahweh. We have to understand the ancient people were ancient. They were pre-industrial, right? Before the industrial age. They were pre-electronic. They didn't have cell phones or televisions. They were pre-digital. They didn't have Google, right? Doing research was significantly harder for them. But while they were pre a number of things, they were not pre-sense. The ancient people weren't stupid. They were not idiots. They did not believe that these little statues or these little idols were the gods. They believed they were touch points of the gods. And the Bible doesn't teach that God is the only God. If the Bible said that, or if the Bible taught, the biblical writers believed that the only God was Yahweh, then why would they say, who is like unto you, O Yahweh, among the gods? Yahweh is real. If the gods are fake, they wouldn't say, who is like you, O Yahweh, among the gods. So by saying who is like you, O Yahweh, among the gods, you're essentially saying Yahweh is fake too, right? So the ancients did not believe in monotheism. They wholeheartedly believed in monolatry. They believed in the existence of a number of gods, but they were loyal to one or group. Right? So first temple period and second temple period. And second temple period, Jews would have included early Christians. They believed there were many gods. But the loyal ones believed and trusted in one God. Like Naaman came to. Like we are supposed to. We believe and we trust in one God. But that doesn't mean that others don't exist. Now, why is this important? This is important because the Bible is many things. But one of those things that the Bible is conflict literature. The word that is usually translated the Lord, which is the Tetragrammaton, Yod He Vav He, YHVH, that and a lot of people pronounce as Yahweh. That word is used over 6,500 times in the Old Testament. About a quarter of those times, or about 1,600 of those times, the word Yahweh is paired with another word to form what's called a Jehovahistic name, and that other word is Savah or Sevaoth. and that's usually translated the Lord of Hosts. Now, a more modern translation would be the Lord of Armies, or Yahweh of Armies, or Yahweh at the head of armies. The Bible is a story of conflict. It is the story of the conflict between Yahweh and those Elohim who are loyal to him on one side, and on the other side you have a bunch of rebellious Elohim. Right? It's the story of that conflict. And we are coming to the end of that conflict. In fact, if you are, or you follow Bible prophecy, there isn't that much left to come in this conflict. And one of the major things left to come in that conflict is the return of the King, the return of Jesus, the return of the Messiah Nagid, the anointed one, the ruler. Now, this return is written all throughout the Bible, all throughout the Old Testament. And throughout the Old Testament is referred to as the day of the Lord, or the day of Yahweh. It's also called the day of Yahweh's wrath, the day of the Lord's wrath, the day of the Lord's vengeance. So according to the Bible, that wrath is primarily aimed at the unseen enemy, the rebellious gods, or the rebellious Elohim, who have helped to bring this world into this state of chaos and decay that it's in. And that's the primary group that wrath is pointed against. Humans, however, have gotten caught up in it because of choice. Right? They have chosen to align themselves to things. So one of the things that we humans need to realize is that we have an enemy. That enemy is real. That enemy knows that its time is short. And if that enemy can delay its time, it will do that. And if that enemy can just help us make choices that destroy ourselves, then it will do that as well. But that's why it is important. And that's why we need to understand that there are many gods. Alright? However, you should be loyal to one, to Yahweh. Thank you. Look out for future videos to come.